Yes.
You're fine. You're fine.
Hey, everybody, this is Vera Sadler from Women of Life and VLS Coaching, and we are here tonight for Tuesday Talk Live. I just want you to be here with us tonight so we have this great conversation with my great and dear friend, Miss Trease Shine Hinton. And she's going to talk to us tonight about just being a survivor. And so I hope that you're blessed by everything you hear, everything you see, because I know that I will be blessed by everything she shares. So I'm not going to delay the point. I'm trying to get my system, my screen set up so it can stop um, being split. But I have known Treese now. Treese, I want to say about how many years? About 20 years now.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I've known Treese for now about 20
Mhm.
years. And we And so I want you guys to get to know her. I want you guys to get to know the woman that I know, the awesome woman of God, the survivor. She's just going to come and share her story. I've been doing these little segments now, Trees, for the past couple of months and just different topics. But I see there's been a theme coming up. You know,
Mhm.
we had Barbara Pettis on here, who's a domestic violence survivor. We've
Yeah.
been talking about mental health and all sorts of things. And coming up in November, I want to do a whole segment on women and surviving and being victimized. But
Yeah.
it's going to be a different type of topic. But
Yeah.
begin just to tell the people a little bit about yourself and where you hail from and all of that.
Okay, my name is Teresa Shine Hinton, and I am from Sarepta, Louisiana, a very small, little bitty town. And that is actually where I am again. I'm back in Louisiana, and we could be here all night for me to tell the whole story, but I'm going to try to, because if I don't tell it from the beginning, then you can't really know how far I've come. Like I said, I am from Sarepta, Louisiana, a very small little town. And I ended up back here in 2013 after a divorce. I won't say that it was a hard divorce. It was the years preceding the divorce were the bad ones. And
Mm.
the way that I met Vera is I when I got married on October 23rd, 1993. And again, I have to tell it from the beginning so that you know exactly where I am now. We got married on October 23rd, 1993. And I will tell you that sometimes if you don't open your eyes enough, God will send people to tell you what you need to know. But in my case, I ignored that too. My
Wow.
mother my mother was she was not a formally educated woman, but my mother had wisdom, and she kept telling me when my ex-husband, we met at Grambling, and he came to see me one time, during our little courtship. It was a very short little period, but he came to see me, and there was it was a lot of years in between when I talked to him, when he came to see me while we were in college, and then when he called me in 1992. And we still had the same phone number. So he called and he left a message for me. My mom said she called me because I wasn't living at the house with her anymore. And she said, "That boy that you met at Grambling called here for you." And I said, "What boy, mama?" "That boy with that gold car." I said, "I don't remember anybody." And I didn't. I didn't remember anybody. But here's the thing. I was 25, I think, at the time, and all my cousins were getting married. All my friends were married. I remembered him. So I was like, "Mama, give me the number." And she's like, "I'm not giving you the number because you don't need to call him." She said, "You don't know what he's coming to do. That boy might come and cut your head off." And I was like, "Anyway, Mama, give me the number." So I talked to her until she gave it to me. Didn't talk to him for maybe 2 weeks, and he came down to see me. Kind of fast forward a little bit, he asked me to marry him. I was like, of course. The man was beautiful. You know, my ex-husband, he was a handsome man, just well built, all of that kind of stuff. And my mom kept telling me, she said, even after she met him, she said, "Don't marry him." She said, "That man has too many loose ends." And you hearing your little clock tick. And I was like, "Mama, you just don't want me to get married. You just don't want me to get married." I had an older brother. I have my oldest brother. He's actually 80 now. And, we've always bumped heads or whatever, but he even came to me. He said, don't go up there with that man, because that meant me leaving where I am right now to move to Denver. And my
Mm.
brother was like, he said, you don't need to go. And, all I was hearing is, you're not good enough. And that's what I said to him. I said, so are you trying to
Oh
tell me that I'm
wow.
not good enough for him? And my brother said, I'm trying to tell you that you're too good. But
You
there
didn't
I
hear it
went.
at that time, did you?
Yeah, exactly. So we got married here in my mom's living room. And I will never forget. And it was so clear to me. It was like you're hearing me right now. We live on a little country road, and I got to run in my pantyhose, and I needed a pair of stockings. So I got up the day of my little wedding, and I had to go to this little store to get some pantyhose. And as clearly as you hear me now, when I got ready to take the left to come back to mama's house, if you, I'm telling you, as loudly as you hear me now, God said to me, keep going. It scared me so bad that I actually looked around to see if somebody was in my back seat. And I was like, okay. Said it again. Keep going, Teresa. I slowed down. But you know what I did? I turned and I came right here. We got
Wow.
married. I had never seen my mother cry before that day. Before, when we pulled out of this yard, I watched my mama cry harder than she has ever cried. And when we had to go through Arkansas, 15 minutes from my house. That's how far Arkansas is. And when I tell you we got into it. And back then I was that, we tend to be that strong black woman where, oh, you're not going to say whatever you want to say to me, and neck popping and all that kind of stuff. So whatever he gave, I gave back. Little
Mm.
did I know, little did I know. We got up there, and I
That was the
remember,
beginning of your story.
yes, I called my mom and I asked her, I said, Mama,
Wow.
I said, why were you crying? And she said, because he's not going to do you right. And I said, Mama, I said, you worry too much. She said, you are the only child that I have that I don't worry about. She said, but he's going to hurt you. And I was like, Mama, I said, you just treat me like I'm 5 years old, this, that, and the other thing. Let me tell you something. We got up there on October 24th, or going into the 25th. My birthday is November 5th. He raped me that night of my birthday, the first birthday that I was there with him. Had no clue what he had done. I did not know the man was on coke. Had no idea that he was on coke. So,
Before you keep going on,
mhm,
and I want you to keep telling this story, but you said some things here that were so crucial, Teresa,
mhm,
that we have to pause so that if anybody chimes in, sometimes people they're going to hear it now or they may hear it later.
yeah,
But you said something that was just so clear right now because you were married, but you said he raped me.
and
And so
that's
I want people to stop and hear that there
exactly
is
that.
such thing as marital rape.
And that's
Been
one of
there
the
and
biggest
done that
arguments that I have with people. You can be raped in your marriage.
within your
Yes, you
marriage.
can.
So
And
I
I'm
wanted
telling
to
you,
slow down and stop
yes,
and make sure
absolutely.
that people are not misconstrued about no,
Mhm.
she did not mix her words. She
Nope,
know what
not
she's
at all.
saying, and that
Not
people
at all.
understand there is such thing as what we
It's marital
call
rape.
marital rape
There
because
is.
no means no means no means no. I know some of us come from the old school. You can't tell your spouse, but if you say
Yes, you
no,
can.
it's no. And if they hold you down and they force themselves, it's rape.
And that's
So I
exactly
want
what
you to
happened.
keep going on and
That's
telling
exactly
them,
what happened, and I
and
was
because
definitely going to get back to that because, I hear it all the time. How could your husband rape you? But yes, he did. And
mhm,
you know him. You know how big he was, and at the time, I
yes,
was so small. I hid in that bathroom. After he did what he did, I heard him leave for work, and that evening, I went to go pick him up because I was gonna get him towed off, but I had packed my bags and I was gonna leave. Well, Tree, I'm sorry. I He literally did not remember doing it because he was so high. So there I was, little silly Teresa, had no idea the man was on coke. I had no idea. I don't even know. I'm just being totally honest with you because I'm woman enough to admit now that I don't even know if I would have said no to going there had I known. I've never done drugs a day in my
Wow.
life. And
Wow.
ironically, that is one of the things that he used to tell people all the time. I never would have married her if she had been doing drugs. He was so proud to tell everybody, oh, my wife has never done drugs a day in her life. I haven't. I've never done anything a day in my life. But like I said, that was my birthday, November 5th. We had been arguing, fighting, and carrying on. And back then, like I said, I was a spitfire. You want to argue and fight? I don't care what time of day it was. If it was 2 o'clock in the morning, let me make a pot of coffee and let's get going. You know what happened? He did it again, New Year's Eve. That time we fought. That time we fought. So I think that I was too embarrassed to go back home. I was too ashamed because I worked with a bunch of older women, and you know how you know how old women are. Oh, you'll be back home. You're not gonna be up there long. And I was like, I'm not going
Mm,
back. I'm not going back. So I got it in my mind that I was gonna stay. So lo and
my
behold,
Lord, my Lord.
yeah, it was bad. And by the time I met you all, we had been into so many fights and so much discord. I had reached out to Apostle Smith for counseling. That's how we ended up at Joy Tabernacle. And I will never forget that our first session, um, when we went, I was so hopeful that everything was going to get
Get
better
better.
because, we started attending church and we were there on the regular, but things were not changing at home. Things were not changing at home. I already had Will, and
Mm.
Will was a baby. And I will never forget, I knew he had been out doing coke and doing all that stuff. So I moved, I left. And see, when I talk to Pastor Harbison now, she knows all the things that happened. She knew after the fact, just like everybody else. No one knew that any of this was going on. And I think that that is such
Absolutely
a
not.
huge thing with domestic violence, especially in the Black community. We don't like to tell people because, one, we're ashamed that it's happening to us. Two, we're supposed to be that woman that's not going to let anybody get over on us. So that's not what it was. Well,
Therese, do
like
you
I
also
said,
think that not only those two things, but we also, and you said in the
yes,
black church, we don't want to address it because then we have
we
to
don't.
deal with
We don't.
it's like the woman has her place, and but we don't want to deal with that man and his issues. I
We don't.
think in our society we have a lot, or our culture,
Hmm.
they don't address that man and his issues.
They
He's
don't.
being a man, or he, and I have found that in the church, it's so hard to say, well, he's doing this. And finally, when you get a good church, though,
Hmm.
where somebody's going to address it, it's
Hmm.
like, wow, you guys are really talking from the pulpit or from,
Yes.
a higher level
Hmm.
about domestic
Hmm.
violence and about
Yes.
these issues that are, but you know that when you finally find one, because you realize the leadership you have leaders of integrity.
Yes. And honestly, Apostle Smith, he tried his
Yes.
best to run interference with us. And he even came over to our house a couple times. But I will never say that it was just, let me put it like this. People are good for saying the marriage didn't work out. I believe fully in those vows that what God puts together, let no man put asunder. God did not put us together. I wanted to be
Mm.
married. I wanted to be married. So there comes
Oh,
William
good
Hinton,
point. That's an excellent
handsome,
point.
smart, had this fantastic job,
Yes.
thought that he loved me. I found out very quickly. One of the things that he said to me that crushed me almost immediately. I only married you because I wanted to see what it was like.
Oh my Lord.
I would overhear him maybe twice telling some of his friends, and this was within the first 6 months of us being married. I made a mistake. I shouldn't have married her. I should have married a white girl. This is the thing that I tell people all the time. I don't care who you are. I don't care who you are. It takes a chink in the armor this big. It takes a split this big for somebody to get into your head. I don't remember. I don't know if you remember the shop down. I want to say it was on Parker and somewhere down in that area, Parker and Iliff, maybe. It was a shop called Ample Duds. I had never even heard of that store, but it was for plus size women. And I remember that we walked past that store one day, and he said to me, he said, "Tree, if you ever have to buy your clothes out of there, I'm leaving you." And I didn't know what Ample Does was. I was like, what are you even talking about? But back then, like I said, you want to argue, let me know what time. We're out there cutting up, clowning, and going on. So eventually, once we started going to church, I will never forget the night that I knew something was wrong. We were supposed to have been in counseling, and I showed up at the church, but he didn't. I had left him by that time. And I showed up at the church and he did not, but I'm trying to get myself straight here. But I will never forget that. I want to say it must have been like choir rehearsal. Something was going on in the sanctuary. I don't remember what it was, but you guys were out there. But after it was over, after my session was over, I went ahead and I went home. And there he came, drunk and high. And I will never forget, I said, I know that there is something wrong. I know that there is something wrong. I said, you need to tell me what it is that's going on. And I knew that I needed to sit down. He had told me that night that he had been accused of raping a woman
Oh, wow.
down in Colorado Springs. The very first thing out of his mouth was, Tree, it was your fault because you wouldn't let me do what I wanted to do that night. That next morning, I got up and I went to my job and I told them that I needed a sabbatical. I told them that if they did not let me go home, I was just going to quit. But by the grace of God, they gave me a 3-week sabbatical and I packed my car up and I drove my baby. Me and my baby drove here and we got home. So this is how the enemy can, I won't even say trick you, but you will see what you want to see.
Mm-hmm.
When I left, he claimed that he lost everything after I left. He literally lost everything. Our place, his car, everything. So he had gone to live with one of his friends, and his friend's wife called me. I want to say about, because I had changed my mind. I wasn't even back in Denver, but she said, Teresa, she said, he's not doing drugs anymore. She said, if you need any confirmation that he is changed, she said, I can tell you that he has. So here he comes, picked me and Will up. My mama looked at me. She said, this time, she said, he's going to break you.
Oh,
And I
my
looked at
Lord.
my mama and I said, Mama, I said, there you go again. She said, you ain't seen nothing yet. She said, he's going to break you this time. And I looked at her and I said, Mama, why are you saying that? She said, you went back too many times. She said, he knows that you're not going to go and stay gone. Little did I know. When I got
The
back
weight
there,
of her statement, huh?
little did I know.
Take a pause break because I just want to get people updated.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
That I am here with my friend, longtime friend, Trease Shine Hinton.
Yep.
And she's telling her survival story. I'm trying to hold it all in and hold it all together. Um, but whoever may be watching this replay, maybe watching it now, maybe watching this replay,
Yep.
if you are going through some of the things that Teresa's talking about now, please heed her story and her voice. Get help before it's too late.
Yep.
And don't keep running back. I
Don't
just
keep
wanted to take a
don't.
pause, a break,
Yeah.
Trees, because what you're saying is so critical, and you're dropping these nuggets, and I know you're just telling it. And Barbara Pettis did the same thing. It sounds so familiar.
Mhm,
So it's the cycle
mhm.
of violence
It is. It is a
that
cycle
sounds
of violence
so.
that you get
It's so
caught in.
strong, and it's so identifiable.
Mhm, mhm.
And so what you're saying is like it just is hitting me to the core of my heart.
I
I was
I
just
haven't
looking
even
at
told
things on
you.
mental health behavior earlier, on this repetitive behavior, this all this we
Mhm.
call it narcissist, but it's not. It's obsessive controlling, and
It is.
all those
It
antisocial and
is.
all those behaviors. And because we don't dig far enough in the closet before we get with somebody. But go ahead, finish telling us when you went back.
Um, when I went back, when we moved out to Green Valley Ranch, let me back up a little bit. I wanted a house. And when we got up there, as you know he made very good money. He was a programmer. And my train of thought was if we get a house out in Green Valley, he still wasn't driving. So I was like, you know what? If we get a house way out there, he won't be able to get into town, go back downtown to do drugs and stuff. He was taking the bus to get back downtown Denver to do drugs or whatever. And this is something that I have only shared with 4 people ever. And a lot of the reason I don't people used to ask me if I was trying to out him or how Will was handling all of this. I'll get to that in a minute, but I'm telling this part of the story because I need people to understand domestic abuse is such a it's an in the closet kind of thing. You don't want anybody, first of all, to know what is
Mhm.
going on. One of the things that William did not tell me, outside of the fact that he was doing coke, was that he had herpes. He didn't tell me that. And
Mm.
I thought that he had passed it on to me. And I said to him, one day we got into this fierce argument. And I said to him, because he had told me that he was going to leave and this, that, and the other thing. He had told me that I was a liability for him.
Lord Jesus.
When and I know I'm kind of skipping around, but after we moved out to Green Valley, he was getting ready to go downtown. And I looked at him and I said, "Why do you keep doing this?" I said, "Stop." And he was like, "Tree, I promise you, I'm coming right back." Of course, he didn't come back until the next day. You have no idea how many times I had to go down and pick him up from detox in Denver. I lost count. But I said to him one night, I said, "So you mean to tell me that you've bought me away from my family?" And I honestly thought that he had given me herpes. And I said, "So what am I supposed to do?" He's like, "Just tell her. Tell the next man." I said, "You didn't tell me." So I still had a little bit of fight in me, but didn't didn't care. So Will was being bullied. And I sent him an email one day. And I said to him in this email, I said, "Sometimes I wish we could just move and get away from Denver." The next email I got was an itinerary for us to fly down to Dallas to look at a house. I was so happy that I didn't even think anything about it. And I never would, I guess I probably never would have thought about it. But fast forward, and we moved down to Dallas. He had started doing coke again, and he was mad because I wasn't working. Here's why I was not working. On July 21st of 2009, I had an aneurysm. We had
And
gone
we thank
down
God
to,
that you survived.
yeah, we had gone down to Florida the first weekend in July for because Will played elite ball. We get down there, and by the grace of God, the lady who was my best friend at the time, she was down there with her then fiance. One of his best friends from Pitt was down there. It was just like this weird meetup because it's like, where are these people coming from? But I remember my best friend looking at me. She had been my best friend since 1987. And she looked at me. She said, Teresa, she said, you look so tired. And I told her some of the things that had been going on. She had no idea. And I remember we were in Florida, and I remember she stopped the car and she cried like a baby. She said, I had no idea that you were going through any of that. So I said to him when I got back to that hotel room, I said, when we get back to Dallas, I said, I need to go somewhere and take a break. I said, I'm tired. He looked at me. He said, Tree, he said, you look tired. He said, when we get back, he said, wherever you want to go, I'll send you so you can get a break. We got back there, and on the morning of October or July 21st, and when I tell you, God planned that entire day. He holds us and he plans everything for us. But that day, if I had veered to the left or the right, I would be dead. I'm going to tell you why. He was working for he had always been a contractor, but he was working out at Expedia out in Fort Worth. We were living in Allen. And that day he was working from home. It was a Tuesday. Had it been a Monday, had it been a Wednesday, had it been a Friday, I would have died. But it was a Tuesday. He was working on his computer. We shared a little home office, and he was over there just tapping away. I was tapping away. It was getting to be time for us to go and pick Will up from, it's called performance camp. So when he was home, he would go and pick him up because he didn't get to spend that much time with him in sports or whatever. So his phone rang, and even the fact that I am able to sit here, I promise you, I'm getting chills all over my body. Even the fact that I'm able to sit here and give you specific times ought to show you how good God is. His phone rang at 10 after 10. Performance camp was over at 10:30. He normally left the house at 10:15. But that day when that phone rang, I wasn't really paying him any attention, but he did catch my attention, and he mouthed it to me. He said, Tree, he said, you have to go get Will. He said, there's a problem. Something had happened at Expedia. So I didn't mince any words or anything. I got my purse. I went over, I kissed him on the forehead, and I left out of the house. It was a 10-minute drive to get to the Lowry Center where Will was at camp. So I get in the car. 5 minutes into that 10-minute drive, he called me. He said, Tree, he said, if you want to, he said, you can turn around. He said, I fixed the problem. I said, no. I said, I'm going to go on. I said, because I want to see my baby run. Vera, I pulled up at that school at 10, that 5 extra minutes. And I remember I had the phone to my ear, still talking to him. And I said, well, let me go. I said, because I see my baby. I said, we'll be home in a minute. I pressed in. And when it was literally like I pressed in, and I remember I jerked my head forward. That thunderbolt hit me right back here. And I remember I jerked my head forward. My hair was real, real long at the time, and I had a ponytail up here. And I remember that when it hit me, I know I didn't black out, but I kind of remember looking around. I was like, what in the world was that? It happened so quickly. I was drenched with sweat. And I remember I took my ponytail. This is how wet with sweat I was. And I twisted it, and water just went everywhere. And I remember looking over at the lady in the car next to me. She had been watching me. She mouthed it to me. She said, are you okay? And I said, no. I knew that I was having an aneurysm because I had done claims for so long. I called him and I said, I'm having an aneurysm. I said, I'm taking myself to the emergency room. He said, Tree, he said, wait. He said, I'm coming. He said, call 911. I said, I'm not sitting here and dying in this car. I said, I'm going to the emergency room. It was a 10-minute drive. I pulled that car in reverse and I started driving. 5 minutes into it, it started, Aneurysm was the aneurysm. And the pain was becoming unbearable. And I remember I was kind of swerving in the road, but I had enough sense to start praying. And I
Yes,
was
thank you,
screaming out
Lord.
to God. I
Thank
said,
you,
God,
Lord.
I said, please, I said, spare me. I said, if you will spare me. And these were my exact words. I said, if you spare me, I said, I promise you, I will tell my story so that no other woman has to go through. I knew what was happening to me. I pleaded with him. I said, don't take me away from my baby. I said, because I don't want to leave him with his dad. I prayed and I prayed and I prayed. And I got to the emergency room, couldn't find anywhere to park. I was in so much pain. I didn't think to just pull up and just go in. So I finally found somewhere to park. And by this time, ooh, that aneurysm was doing what the aneurysm does for real. So I staggered and got into the building, and I got up to the counter, and I told the lady, I said, ma'am, I said, I need to see somebody. I said, I'm having an aneurysm. Little girl never looked up. She said, ma'am, I need your insurance card. I said, lady, I'm dying. I said, if you don't, I said, I need a doctor right now. But ma'am, I need your insurance card. By that time I threw up. There they come running. They doctors coming from every which way. And I'm screaming,
Mm.
like screaming. And they got me back in there. And the doctor, she lays me down. Well, I don't know. I said, I'm having an aneurysm. I said, I am dying. Well, we're going to do this and that. I said, lady, if you don't do what you're supposed to do, I said, I'm going to die within the next couple of minutes. They rushed and they did a spinal tap. And when she looked, I was laying on my back, but I remember looking up at her. Her eyes were this big. She said, oh my gosh, she's having an aneurysm. I'm like, you don't say. So by this time, William had made it there, and he had my baby with him. And they were like, we got to get her over to Dallas because they weren't equipped to handle what was going on with me. So long story short, they got me over to Dallas Presbyterian. And I will never forget. They were like, okay, she's
My
having an
God, my
aneurysm.
God.
They gave me morphine, and that was like giving me a baby aspirin. I was still in so much pain. But I remember that I heard the doctor say, we need to get her in ICU. We got to get her tied down because we can't have her moving or anything. And I remember I was flat on my back and I opened my eyes. And I was full of foolishness. And I was like, oh my God, I must have died because I could see. But I forgot that I had my glasses on. So the man, I closed my eyes again. And that man bent down and he said, Sister Hinton, he said, God told me to tell you, you're going to be okay. He said, but you got to let go of what put you here. And I
My
opened my,
Lord, my Lord, my Lord.
I looked up at him. I was still in so much pain, but I looked up at him. I said, who are you? He said, Sister Hinton, he said, I'm going to tell you again. He said, God is going to see you through this. He said, but he said for you to let go of what put you here. I said, who are you? I said, what church do you go to? I said, because you're not calling me Sister Hinton just to be calling me Sister Hinton. He said, I go to IBOC. He said, I'm a deacon at IBOC. He said, and let me tell you something. He said, normally when I bring people down here, he said, I'm covering them up. He said, you are going to be okay. Let me tell you something. They dug around in my head, my back, my groin. They went everywhere. They could not find that bleed. They could not find that bleed. I went home after 4 days to show you who I was dealing with. After he came to pick me up on that fourth day, he was literally arguing with me about, I don't remember, it was about a car. And I remember a nurse opening the door. She said, Mr. Hinton, do you understand that your wife almost died 4 days ago? Why are you arguing with her? But that's who it was. I'm trying my best to get to, there's so much to tell. There's so much to tell, but
We're gonna have to have you come back and tell the rest of it.
yeah, because it's a lot. But I can tell you that um domestic violence, we were going to Tony Evans's church, and we started going to counseling, Will and I. And the first time I heard of emotional abuse was when I went into counseling. And when I told him that the man had said that Will and I were emotionally abused. He said, "Who's doing it?" I said, "You." So when I tell you, the people think that domestic violence is all about the physical. I was wearing scars and bruises and knots that nobody ever knew about because most victims, they don't want to tell. They're
Right.
embarrassed. You had to deal with the family members. Well, what did you do? That's how it is. That's just an argument. No, it's not.
Well, you must have
Mm-mm.
said something that set them
It is.
off. It's those kind of statements,
Yes. Yep.
and you
Yes.
know, people look at us. You said something very important earlier. You said people look at us and they see this. They see the outer shell. One,
Mhm.
they never know the abuse that you're carrying internally,
They don't.
especially if it's emotional. And
They
even people hide physical abuse as well. But the
Mhm.
emotional abuse is so intense. I mean, there were things said to me in my previous marriage that I have shared with people when
Mhm.
I have done, as God gives me the
Mhm.
liberty to share.
Yeah.
It's not my time to share it all right now, but there are
Yeah.
some things that I've shared, Trees, and people said, "What?"
Mhm.
And then there's another thing. I know you're a very educated woman,
Yes.
very educated, very smart, beautiful, smart, educated. And you would think people look at us and they say, because I'm the same way, smart, always been a career woman and all this stuff. And
Mhm.
people look at you and they say, "Well, didn't you know any better?" Well, I don't know. For you, like me, you kind of alluded to this earlier. There were some things you didn't even realize.
You
I
had no
was in a
clue.
situation where I was being manipulated
Yes.
verbally,
Yes.
manipulated, and until I got out of the situation,
You didn't
and
know.
I was
Yes.
like, "Oh, that was manipulation." That comment was to force me to behave a certain way out of guilt, out of this, out of that.
Exactly.
And there's so
Exactly.
much
And I
of
think
that.
that what you just said, the reason that you didn't see it is because that's what your norm was. Because when I had the aneurysm, they sent a social worker in, a psychiatrist, a psychologist. They were like, "Is anything abnormal going on?" And I kept saying no, because that was our norm. All the
Right.
fighting and carrying on, that was normal. So I wasn't lying. It's just that's what happened in my house. So that was normal for
And
me.
who's there to help us realize this is not normal. This is not the way somebody should talk to you. This is not way love responds. Love really doesn't respond. And then you said something else that I wanted to go back to real quick. You said earlier that you heard certain statements,
Mhm.
but they didn't trigger you to leave.
Because I was so
Eh,
busy, flapping back. You
mm.
say something smart to me, I'm gonna say something smart back.
So you have that syndrome, but then you also have women who are in the same situation. Again, they're used to the abuse; it becomes their
Mhm,
norm. So even the physical abuse,
mhm.
um, they don't they don't leave. What
They
was your breaking point? Tell me, what was your breaking point?
You want me to tell you the honest God truth? And I tell
Yes,
people all
please.
this all the time. The door was always open for me to go. The door was always open for he wouldn't have cared one way or the other. He filed for divorce, and you know why? He said, "Tree, I don't think that you will ever be able to truly forgive me for everything that I did." What happened was he had taken a job in Baltimore. It was either Virginia or Baltimore, but he had moved back in with his mom. And I remember the first time he left and we watched that plane fly off. And I said to my baby, I said, "This time," I said, "me and your daddy are going to get divorced." And he said, "Mama, why?" I said, "Because your grandmother is going to push it." Sure enough, when he got there, he was there maybe a week or two. And he told me that she tried to fix him up with her neighbor. And she kept telling him, "Teresa, that she didn't really forgive you. She mad at she probably got a guy right now." So there it was. And when he came in and told me that he wanted that divorce, if you think I said to him, I said, "Give me the papers so I can sign them." And he was like, he looked, he said, "What?" I said, "You just told me you want a divorce." I said, "Where are the papers?" "So you don't want to talk about it?" There we go with that manipulation. begged me to stay. That was a couple days after my birthday in 2012. He did not bring those papers back until 2013, February of 2013.
mhm,
He came back to that house where we lived in Allen, and we sat down and we started splitting things, a fork, a spoon. We literally split things down the middle. He looked at me and he said, "It took me so long to get these papers to you because I wasn't sure if I was going to divorce you or not." I said, "Did." When he found out that I was going to get my master's, well, 3 years after we got divorced, "Girl, you just trying to impress me. You trying to get me back. I don't even
all
like
about
you."
him. Still that narcissistic behavior,
Mhm.
that it's all about him instead of you
Mhm.
wanting to move on and
Exactly.
better your life. I hope there is someone that will watch this and
Mhm.
listening in will say and will see that there is a way out. I know there's some people it comes with very short of them losing their life.
Yes.
You almost lost your life.
I did.
There are others where the light bulb is their children
Yeah.
being at harm's way. It's all
Yes.
kind of things, but the message I know that we're trying to portray, and I know you.
Mhm.
That's one good thing I do know you,
Yes.
that you want. Treese is a writer. She's an
Yeah.
educator. She's so humble. She didn't tell anybody any of this in her opening, but she's a
No.
writer. She's an educator. She teaches
Mhm.
and she helps others, and God has just so
Yeah.
richly blessed your
Yes.
latter years. He has so richly blessed your latter years. One of the things that I really want people to know is that there is an out and that they don't have to and I love the way you've been bringing out that abuse is not just
Mhm.
about the punches, but
It's not.
there's so much abuse going on that we take, and you've dropped so many good nuggets. You talked
Mhm.
about things that a lot of people don't want to talk about. What
And another thing that I want to remind the people who are listening, like Vera said, there's an out, but you guys, there's an aftermath. There is an
oh
aftermath. And let me tell you something about the aftermath. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that as soon as this divorce is over and as soon as you're out, God, you're going to be running around and frolicking in the flower. No, you're not. Because you gotta you gotta come back here. Because after all those
mhm,
years, I don't care if it's been 3 days, after that abuse, you have to take time to find you again. Because
mhm,
all of
mhm,
that stuff happened to me at one time. The divorce was final in April. Will left to go to school in June. He left me with a 3,500 square foot home and $250 to pack up all that stuff and move it. My brother and my nephew's friend came and they helped me. And I remember sitting on that floor after Will left in that big house by myself. And I was like, I am by myself after almost 20 years. Will was gone.
that's a long
He was
time.
gone. So there's an aftermath. And like I said, you're not going to wake up one morning and be, wee. No, that stuff comes back to you. Some of the things you're going to have triggers. Used to be, I couldn't stand to see anybody in a flannel shirt. I don't care what you wear now, but little things. That's why I tell people you got to hold so tight to God's hand. You have to squeeze and not
Yes,
let go.
yes.
Because if you don't, that stuff will trigger you for the rest of your life. You will never get out of it. I don't tell anybody, oh, you're just supposed to get over it. No, ma'am. Sometimes it takes a minute to get over it, but you will. You can if you learn to stay on your knees. I had to. I had to. And sometimes you don't even know what to pray for yourself. That's where your that's where your friends come in. So
And
there's
counseling is a huge that we
yes.
don't talk about in our culture a lot. We think it's taboo, but
Mhm,
between prayer and counseling and you know just being there in that place where healing that's
mhm,
you're right, that's another good point,
mhm.
that if not you just take that baggage into another relationship. You'll wind up like I said, I keep
Yeah.
bringing back up Miss Barbara Pettis because she talked about the
Mhm,
same thing, but she talked about being married 3 times to
mhm.
a wrong person,
Yes.
repetitive, because her abuse started at home with her mom. And
Yes.
so just even these cycles,
Mhm.
like you're saying, if you don't deal with yourself, where you've been, the
You are
trauma,
done.
that you've
Yeah.
had going on in your life, because
Yeah.
that was traumatic. I don't care what people anybody say. Marital rape, find out your
Yeah.
husband has this disease that you think
Yeah.
he gave to you, possibility. All those different things that you're
Mhm.
dealing with day in and day out. And even the cope, that would probably leave a thought in your mind. You never know if your home is secure because you never know what they're caught up into. So
And
you didn't have to say it, but I know what you're.
that's exactly what I always your home is supposed to be your haven.
Hmm.
That's your soft landing. But do you know how many nights I stayed when he would come home after being gone for 2 or 3 weeks for work or whatever, but I knew, I'm telling you, was sweeping the floor once when he came home. It was like a dust bunny or something. And he looked down on that floor. He said, "See how you missed that?" So, but the next day, let's go get something to eat. Man, I don't want to go anywhere with you. So it was, it was here, there, here, go. He yelled once, he got mad once, and there had been times when he'd said horrible, awful things to me, but that man yelled at me once that he hated me. And I don't know what it was. You could feel the hatred in his voice. That one time, out of all the times that he said horrible things to me, that shook me. It made me tremble. And that's why I tell women all the time, there's not one thing that you can tell me that would shock me. He offered me to his friend,
Jesus, have mercy.
Teresa, just let me watch. So I tell you again, there's nothing that you can tell me that will surprise me. There's nothing that you can tell me. I don't try to one up anybody. But let me tell you something. I've been through it. And I'm sitting right here working
A
on my
survivor.
doctorate degree, working on my doctorate degree, trying to figure out what I'm going to do to my home because he did tell me all the time, you're never going to have a house. You're never going to have this without me. That got a brand new car. Nobody else is going to want you. Really? Mm. Yeah.
One of the things I wrote down, Trees, here was I wrote down two descriptions of words, and we have about 13 minutes here before we have to hop off. But I wrote down two words here. One was trauma, and
Hmm.
it says a deeply disturbing or distressing experience.
Hmm.
It can be a physical injury, but most people don't realize trauma doesn't have to be physical. Deeply distressing or disturbing experience. And I wanted to bring these out because when I put the title of what we were going to talk about, I said
Hmm.
surviving trauma.
Hmm.
And what you described is definitely trauma. And having then to survive, to live or exist in spite of that
Yes.
hardship. and
Yes.
and to me is beyond existing. It's that word live, because to me live means you have life, you're
Yes.
thriving. It's the after, it's
Yes.
after the trauma. How do I
The aftermath.
survive after the trauma? And I'm glad you shared with the women. Deal with yourself.
Yes.
Get in your get to here and get some professional help.
Yes.
We always want to encourage people, get some professional help, because we
Mhm.
can't do that on our own.
We can't.
So these things that you're telling and you're sharing,
Mhm.
um, I mean, so much. And we know abuse is not stopping. It hasn't been slowing down. The best we can do is to continue
Mhm.
shedding a light to it and bringing
Yes.
awareness to it. And I thank you for sharing. I
Mhm.
mean, some people would say, "Man, she's telling all his no, no, no. This was your reality.
This is what
This
happened.
this was your
Yeah.
reality. This is what happened." And
Mhm.
and by the grace of God, He
Mhm.
allowed you to come out on this
Yes.
side. And
Yes.
I know people looking at you saying, "Man, she's beautiful. You wouldn't be able." But that's where people make the mistake. There are people in your midst. I want to say this to people. There are people in your midst that
Mhm.
are hurting, because when I met you, there were
Mhm.
times I was thinking, "Oh, he's a big rough dude," because
Yes.
he was just big. He was like what,
Yes.
6'4", six
Yes.
three,
It's
6'4",
true. Yeah.
big, big,
Mhm.
built, stocky guy.
Mhm.
You would think that, but you were always so
Yeah.
amazingly together.
Yeah.
And the struggle, but just knowing the struggle that you probably were going through to hold it together like that.
And I think that so many people I was a claims adjuster for a lot of years, and I was a family law paralegal, and I will never forget a girl came in, and she looked at me, she said, "You will never know what I went through. How could you possibly understand?" And so God gave me the opportunity to share with her, and she sat there with her mouth open. She said, "I never would have thought it looking at you." I said, "And
Mhm.
therein lies the entire problem. You never know who's being abused, because in these wealthy neighborhoods, oh, I've met some women, let me tell you something, some trophy wives who have been feeling it behind those closed doors. So you never know. It 1 in 4 women, one
Yeah.
in 4 women. And that
Yeah.
is why I'm not, I, you heard me. I told God if He kept me here, I was going to tell my story.
Yes.
That's
And,
exactly.
and the other thing, reason we want to tell your story and stories like yours and
Mhm,
a whole bunch of other people like you. I will say this: if you are an individual with that's dealing with it, or you're a survivor,
mhm.
please hit me up on Facebook because we want to connect with you.
Yes,
We want to share. I have the domestic violence hotline number on
yes.
the screen. Reach out, get
Mhm.
help, get out, find a
Yes.
place of safety.
Mhm.
Just don't keep going back. Because as you're
Don't
saying,
keep going
every
back.
time you went back, it never changed, did it?
But here's one thing, I know that we have to go, but this is one thing that I do have a ministry of my own that I talk to women, and I'm gonna start getting my Facebook Live sessions back. Here's the thing that I remind women of all the time. We're sitting here telling you not to go back and it's time for you to go, but be careful with when you go, because
Yes,
don't just jump up and leave tonight and you're in there packing your bags, because so many women do not make it out when they're
alive.
trying to literally walk out the door. Sometimes you need to get a plan together, because if he
Exactly.
knows that you're leaving, you may not make it out. I have a very good friend who lost her sister-in-law because she told him he had until Friday to get out. He stabbed her 44 times Thursday night. Sometimes you just can't, you got to work the plan. That's how
You
you
definitely
catch
have to
it.
have a plan. Thank you for bringing that
Yes,
up and reminding you. Definitely have to
yes.
have a plan. It just can't be sporadic because there's so
It
much
cannot be,
violence.
but by all means, start making the plan, especially
Yes,
if there are
yes.
children
What
involved.
is
And
the
that's
name of your ministry? What is the name of your ministry?
it's see through me. And I will send you the information.
See through me.
Uh-huh. And I will send you the information. So, because I do have a private group on Facebook, and I also have a public page, but the see through me is a private group because so many
Yes.
women don't even want you to know that they're looking.
Mhm.
And that's okay with me. That is okay. As long as you hear me, I don't have to see you, but you need to see
Yes.
through me. So,
And so, guys, she's going to get, if you are interested in getting the information from Miss Treese Shine
yeah,
Hinton and you want to know her information, for
yes,
her ministry, for her private group. And I thank you for keeping it private. I thank
yes,
you for protecting those that will reach
mhm,
out to you and those that need the help.
yes,
That's such a blessing to so many.
yes,
Please, my website is scrolling across the page. You can reach out to me there. You can
yes,
reach out to me on Facebook. You can call, text that number that you see, the 469
yes,
369 2610. You can text that number or reach out to me in any of my social media platforms and say,
yeah,
I want to get in touch with See Through Me. And I will make sure that I
yes,
connect you
please,
with this awesome woman of God who
yes,
is not just telling her story about going through trauma, but she said that
mhm,
she has survived. But the
mhm.
biggest thing was there was trauma and there was things that were so hidden that none of us, even her people that saw her on a weekly basis,
Had no
knew that she
idea.
was struggling or suffering through. And so many of us hide, so many of us hide,
And we're
so
good at
many
it.
of us, we're very good at it.
We are
And
great.
we
Yeah.
just we can put on a face. We live through a
Mhm,
facade.
mhm.
And I know for both of us, we're living in a better place.
Much,
We're
yeah,
living um
yeah.
in a different atmosphere now, but
Mhm.
there's some who aren't. We are here for you. We're your sisters.
Please
We love you
know
and
that.
we want to give you the help and the support. Well,
Please know that.
Treese, before we close out, we got about 5 minutes. What would be your closing comments or remarks to this group that's been listening or will listen?
What I want you guys to know, and I know that it sounds cliche, please know how much you are loved. Don't
Yes.
let the one person in this world who truly does not love you detract you and pull you away from everyone who does. You
Wow.
remember nothing else. Remember, God truly does love you. You got to get somewhere and get quiet. He will lead you right out of that thing. But don't ever let that manipulator make you believe that you are unlovable. Don't ever let that person stop you from loving the people, because they will pull you away. They will alienate you in a minute and you will feel like you have nowhere else to turn. I know I can speak for Vera when I say, even if you need to turn to one of us, because
Yes.
sometimes you do need to talk to somebody that you are not fearful is going to be biased. And girl, I wouldn't put up with this. And man, hush. Because I think that
Exactly.
that's one of our biggest stumbling blocks. We know that people are going to cut up if we tell them. So reach out, reach out, get some help because it's out
Yes.
there. It is out there.
And you
And I
are loved.
appreciate you
Man,
guys
that's
so
so
much
good.
for, I
Oh,
appreciate
girl,
you
you
for
just
having
don't
me.
know how much I appreciate you for
Yes.
sharing
Hmm.
that. And we'll probably have to have you come back and tell, oh
Yes.
my gosh, working on this doctorate. I'm so proud of you, my sister.
Yes.
I'm scared to
Got a
start mine because I'm
96 in
scared
that
of the
first
work.
class.
Oh my gosh, I'm scared to
Yes.
start it. It's
Yep.
it's a lot of work. It's a lot of
It is.
diligence, and
It is.
I just admire you. I know
Thank you.
you like
Thank
to
you.
write. You're great at it.
I do.
But oh my gosh, I don't
I
know if I
do.
could do that much writing anymore.
It's some love stuff going on there. I love it. I do. And I love teaching it. So yeah, I'm so grateful for you having me on. I am.
Yes.
Because there's
And
so many
so,
people
guys,
out there.
again, this is Vera Sadler with Tuesday Talk Live with Miss Treese Hinton, and we are talking about surviving. And we're
Mhm,
talking about surviving trauma, but really, she really came and shared her heart with us tonight about
mhm.
what trauma looks like from
Yep.
another side of what
Yep.
people don't always notice. And again, I appreciate you for that. So glad to catch up
Absolutely.
with you again, my sister. And
Yes.
we will talk again soon.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You have a wonderful,
You
wonderful
too.
night, everybody.
Bye, you guys.